So, but maybe he was a victim on 9/11, and let me explore that possibility. What was the very strange behavior of President George W. Bush? Most of you know that he went to Booker Elementary School in Sarasota, Florida, visit a classroom, and hear some elementary school children read on 9/11. Now, that was a very strange place for him to be on 9/11, but you say, well, nobody knew that 9/11 was coming in advance, but I think they did. I think President Bush was deliberately put in that schoolroom to be far away from the center of power on 9/11. And who was in charge of the whole emergency on 9/11? This is an irrefutable fact that Vice President Cheney was totally in charge on 9/11, and even up until a couple of days afterwards, that he was totally in charge of the whole government at this point in time. So, President Bush was going to this classroom to hear elementary school children read out loud. On the way to the classroom, he comes in the presidential limo, he goes into the classroom, he's about to enter, and someone tells him that the World Trade Center has been hit by a plane. So he knows that at this point in time. And according to his own words, he believes that this was just a bad accident at this time. He's not suspicious at all. Well, reports say that the CIA was very suspicious, and they already thought that this was probably came from Al-Qaeda. But did they tell the President of the United States this? No. He just receives short words that the World Trade Center has been hit by an airplane. So he goes into the classroom, he's listening to children read. Approximately 5 minutes go by, and then his chief of staff, Andrew Card, sneaks in and whispers in his ear, a plane has hit the second tower of the World Trade Center, and, quote, we are under attack. Now those are ominous words, that the United States of America is under attack. And this is the President of the United States here. So shouldn't he react immediately? Shouldn't he start asking questions? Who do you think attacked us? Is there any more possibilities of attack? He is the one that would order all the planes out of the skies, which eventually happened, but he didn't order it. He's the one that would decide that we could intercept any other planes and shoot them down. Does he do any of this? Does he even ask a single question at this time? No, he does nothing. He sits there and listens to the kids read. And his press secretary, a few minutes later, holds up a big sign saying, don't say anything, from the back of the room. Wow. Shouldn't the President of the United States decide whether he will say anything or not? His press secretary. Does this indicate somebody that's in charge, or that somebody else is in charge other than President Bush? But anyway, he listens. He's in no hurry. Even after the kids have finished reading, he talks to them. He says, do you watch more TV or do you read more? It turns out they claim they read more. And the kids are gone. He goes and talks to the teacher. He is in absolutely no hurry to do anything at this point in time. Now, here's a question. A lot of people say, President Bush is not too bright. He was paralyzed by fear, blah, blah, blah. That's why he stayed in the classroom for 8 minutes. But what about the Secret Service? Shouldn't they have come and forced him to leave? They did that to Dick Cheney in the White House. They grabbed him under each arm and carried him down to a bunker underneath the White House. But the President of the United States was in a public building where he's on TV, the whole world knows exactly where he is, and airplanes are coming and striking buildings from the sky. Wouldn't the President of the United States be a logical target? Of course. So shouldn't the Secret Service have gotten him away from this dangerous place? Absolutely, not only for his sake, but for the hundreds of school children who have been killed if an airplane hits this building. Secret Service did nothing either. An astounding fact. So, President Bush leaves the room. He gives a short speech. He talks to Condoleezza Rice and Dick Cheney. Gets in the presidential limo. Goes to the airport, Air Force One. At this point, it's been about 1 hour since WTC-2 was struck, where he goes to the airport where Air Force One is. He enters Air Force One. He talks more with Cheney and Secret Service, Condoleezza Rice, and different people. And they tell him that there was a very credible threat against Air Force One. Obviously, they believed that this was a credible threat, because what happened to Air Force One, it takes off almost straight up. It takes off like a bat out of hell. And we know because there are many witnesses. A lot of people were on this plane, including press people and so on. They didn't know exactly what's going on, but they testified that it took off like a bat out of hell and almost straight up. Air Force One probably has a lot more power than the average commercial jetliner. So, then while he's up there, there's another threat which is even more specific, perhaps part of the same threat, but worded much more stronger because, and this is from Dick Cheney and the Secret Service, because they say, Angel is next. What is Angel? Angel is the secret code word for Air Force One. So somebody knew the secret code word for Air Force One and is threatening Air Force One, and obviously the president using the secret code word. This tells you that whoever this was cracked our code. They knew a top secret code for Air Force One. Now later on, some months later, people were saying, this never happened. Well, that's sheer and utter baloney. Vice President Dick Cheney said it happened. Condoleezza Rice said it happened. Colonel Loeb said it happened. The very behavior of Air Force One proves it happened. The way it behaved, the way it took off straight up. Even when it got high in the air, it did all kinds of maneuvers, and it would not go back to Washington, obviously because they felt there was a threat. It was a long time before President Bush got back to Washington. That was also a campaign issue, by the way. So clearly there was a credible threat, and many people that said the code word Angel is next was said at that point in time. So there's a very interesting and a very scary point. Now here's another very important point. From the time that the second plane hit WTC-2, which is a little after 9, till they got to the airport, was about 1 hour. From the time they took off and got up in the sky until they got any fighter protection from jet planes was another hour. So there were 2 hours they were without any air cover, any fighter protection for Air Force One with the President of the United States. Now, this is a time when planes were striking objects where the biggest danger to the president was probably in the sky. If you can hit a World Trade Center, maybe you can hit an Air Force One. It should have had fighter protection. In 2 hours, a military jet plane can travel about 2,500 miles. Whoa, how many Air Force bases are within 2,500 miles? So the answer is many, and some are only like 10, 15 minutes away. So why did the president not have any fighter protection for Air Force One? And clearly there was a threat to Air Force One. Kind of a similar question of why the Secret Service didn't take him out of that schoolroom. Because they were sort of like hanging him out to dry. The forces behind 9/11 were saying to President Bush, we can control your Secret Service. In part 1, we talked about whether President Bush was a villain of 9/11 or a victim. I am convinced he was a victim of 9/11. They were out to get him. Were they trying to kill him or just to scare him? I believe they were trying to frighten him into going along with 9/11. Now, people have said, this were true, President Bush is a coward. He should have gladly sacrificed his life to tell the world what he knew about 9/11. What if more than his own life for its sake? We talked about people behind 9/11 knew the secret code word for Air Force One. They knew, quote, Angel was next. Did they know any other code words? Perhaps did they have any power to launch a nuclear attack? There are 3 incidences that we know of for sure involving nuclear missiles and unidentified flying objects in the vicinity. Now, I'm not claiming these unidentified flying objects were necessarily aliens. Perhaps they were from this Earth. But they were there during all 3 of these incidences. First incident we'll talk about was in 1982 in the Soviet Union. And in this incident, all of the Soviet ICBMs were armed for launch and made ready to launch. Such a signal could only come from Moscow, but it did not. It came from somewhere there, and there were UFOs in the vicinity. Second incident we're going to talk about was in 1967 in Montana with our Minuteman missiles. In this case, just the opposite occurred. Every missile there was totally shut down, so it was incapable of being launched. Just the opposite of the Soviet Union incident. Third incident was also, again in Montana in the United States in 1975. In this incident, the targeting tapes were modified, so the missiles were pointed at different targets than they were originally targeted for. So we have missiles being armed and being made ready to launch, missiles being totally disabled so that they could not be launched, and missiles where the targeting was changed to a different target. These 3 incidents we know about. Were there more? There could be hundreds more. The United States is not going to advertise this, neither the Soviet Union, because it's very scary, extremely scary. Now, did they take this seriously? You bet. They took this extremely seriously. There is a document called Agreement on Measures to Reduce the Risk of Nuclear War between the United States of America and the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics. It was signed by both countries September 30th, 1971. Here's a quote from Article 3. The parties undertake to notify each other immediately in the event of detection by missile warning systems of unidentified objects or in the event of signs of interference with these systems or with related communications facilities, if such occurrences could create a risk of outbreak of nuclear war between the 2 countries. Both the United States and the Soviet Union took this seriously enough to actually put it in a signed agreement, the possibility that UFOs could interfere with the targeting of our nuclear missiles and accidentally cause a nuclear war. We are saying that President Bush knew in advance about 9/11 and could do nothing about it. Now, here is one of the most interesting instances that is little talked about, that I think is very, very, extremely significant. On December 4th, 2001, Bush was asked, "How did you feel when you heard about the terrorist attack?" This is 3 months after the attack. Bush replied, "I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower. The TV was obviously on. And I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. I said it must have been a horrible accident, but I was whisked away off there. I didn't have much time to think about it." Well, what is wrong with this statement? Well, every expert agrees that it could not have happened. There was no televised event of the first plane hitting the first tower at that point in time. He could not possibly have seen that on the TV in the Booker Elementary School. Totally impossible. people say, well, that's just proof of how stupid George Bush was, how confused his memory is, and so on. Well, this is not a valid argument. George Bush was not stupid. He graduated from Yale University. No one who's stupid ever graduated from Yale. You saw him in the debates. He was not the greatest debater in the world, but he held his own. He was there in front of 100 million people debating his opponent, and he held his own. George Bush is not the village idiot, so that is not a good explanation. But even if he were, he had many aides who would have said to him, President Bush, you said you saw the first plane hit the tower. That's ridiculous. Couldn't possibly have happened. Because a month later, he goes and tells almost exactly the same story. On January 5th, 2002, he says, well, I was sitting in a schoolhouse in Florida, my chief of staff. Well, first of all, when we walked in the classroom, I had seen this plane fly into the first building. There was a TV set on. And you know, I thought it was pilot error, and I was amazed that anybody could make such a terrible mistake. And something was wrong with the plane. It is my opinion that Bush is trying to tell us something by stating something that seemed obviously false, and stating it very emphatically, and stating it twice. There had to be a reason for it. What points is he making here? One, he saw the first plane hit the first tower on television. How was that possible? One possibility is that there was a computer simulation that was shown to him before it actually happened. It would be easy to make a computer simulation of this. Who would do this? Powers behind, because they wanted to demonstrate to President Bush what was going to happen. Two, another possibility is because they knew in advance about it, they had planted some cameras to televise this on close secret just to certain people. President Bush being one of them. The world never saw this secret camera, never saw the televised. Perhaps it was broadcast to him when he was in the limo on the way to Booker. So, either way, either one of these possibilities is evidence that it was planned in advance and that President Bush knew about it in advance. Point number two, the pilots were terrible. Why would he say this? Because he knew that the Arab pilots with their minimal training were not capable of flying the planes the way they were flown. This is especially true in the case of the plane that hit the Pentagon. The Twin Towers stand way up in the air. They're very obvious, and they might be able to hit an amateur pilot. The Pentagon is a relatively flat building. It's way down there. You're flying above, and if you recognize the Pentagon from above, then what are you going to do as an amateur pilot? You're going to aim your plane straight down and hit it towards the roof of the Pentagon and try to hit it. Did they do that? No. The plane that hit the Pentagon did a 270-degree turn, dropped 7,000 feet, went down below treetop level. We know it was below treetop level because it actually snapped off some things along the way, hit the Pentagon right in the side, and hit it in a very particular place. Now, flying at treetop level with a big commercial jet is incredibly difficult. You make the slightest error, you crash into the ground. You make the slightest error the other direction, you'll fly right over the Pentagon, not even touch it. But it hit the Pentagon dead center on the side, where in a sector that had been recently reinforced to do what? To withstand a terrorist attack. Now, what are the odds of them hitting the Pentagon in the exact place that was specifically reinforced to withstand a terrorist attack? Odds are incredible. Why would the terrorists do this? Why would the powers behind 9/11 do this? Because they want to demonstrate that we will hit you in your best place, your specially reinforced place. We will still penetrate you because our technology is superior to yours. I believe they were trying to prove the point. So, what's the third point? He says there was something wrong with the planes. Well, what was was wrong with the planes. They were piloted by remote control. There's no other explanation for the precise piloting, particularly of the plane that hit the Pentagon. The Arab pilot could not do that. It must have been piloted by remote control, and probably the other planes were also. Child's play, fly at least by remote control, if you can get the proper software and so on into the plane. It can be done. The technology exists. What's a cruise missile? It's a missile piloted by remote control. They're extremely accurate. So, we have the 3 points that President Bush made. He saw it on TV before he could see it. The pilots were terrible. They could not have done what they've done. There's something wrong with the planes because they were piloted by remote control. So, I do believe that President Bush knew in advance. He could do nothing about it. He tried to give us some clues of what were going on to help us maybe solve the puzzle a little bit. Now, I'm going to briefly summarize. I am not saying the United States government was behind 9/11. I'm saying just the opposite. There was a stronger force behind 9/11 that overruled the United States government. Now, if you don't like my theory and you want to explain it with your own theories, let me state some points I think any theory has to take into account. 1. Why was President Bush totally removed from the center of power during 9/11? 2. Why was he not warned that the first plane was a terrorist attack? We knew that that plane was not an accident, the very first one. 3. Why was he left totally unprotected by Secret Service for 8 minutes while death rained down from the sky, and Vice President Cheney was grabbed by his elbows and carried bodily to a bunker underneath the White House? 4. Why did President Bush not ask a single question when he was told, "We are under attack"? 5. When there were very obvious threats to Air Force One, why was it 2 hours before Air Force One received any fighter plane protection? 6. How did the terrorists get the secret code word for Air Force One, Angel? 7. Why did it take so long for President Bush to return to the White House? 8. How did an amateur pilot who had never flown anything bigger than a Cessna take a huge commercial jet, make it to a 270-degree turn while losing 7,000 feet, skim at below treetop level, knocking over several light poles, and hitting the Pentagon at a very critical strategic point? And last but not least, why did President Bush repeat twice his story that he saw the first plane hit the first tower on television when it was seemingly impossible for him to have done so? What kind of a message was he trying to get by insisting on this impossible event? Now, if your theory fits all these things, great, more power to you. If not, please consider my theory. I've written a book called The Angel and the Beast. It's available Barnes & Noble or booklocker.com. Please give it a read. If I'm correct, this is extremely, extremely important for the people of the United States and the world to know what's going on in the world and with our government. Thank you.